I was stationed in Clovis, New Mexico, at the air base there, and waiting to go overseas. And there's somebody I knew who knew your mother, and who gave me her name and address. And so next time I went down to Austin, in those days, I would hitchhike all over the country. I always figured it would be, a very efficient way of moving around. I didn't have to have reservations, so forth.
You were in uniform?
Yeah, I was in uniform, and I could expect to get rides, and to get rides in a very efficient way.
Sure.
And this was true all over. You don't see that anymore.
Never.
And so I had this introduction to her. She was in school down there, and every once in a while I'd hitchhike down and visit with her, and with her roommate, who was more interested in me than your mother was. But I wasn't interested in the roommate. I was interested in her. But she was very bright, and she was attractive in other ways. And then, eventually, I left, went overseas, and did this, that, and the other. And she ended up going to the University of Chicago, social worker, to become a social worker, knowing that I was going to be here. And we were dating here when I was in law school. By this time I was in law school. She came when I was still in college, but only the last couple or 3 months. But it was when I was in law school, and in about January of that year, it was my first year in law school, I ended up saying in effect to her, look, we can't keep this up, because I have to, I'm a student, so we got to get married. Very simple. It was just simply.
How old were you?
Huh?
How old were you? How old were you? January 1949.
23, I think.
Well, I was born in 25, so you take it from there.
23.
So we talked about it. And Idahoe is where we did our negotiations, right? And so and I remember Larry Burns telling people that he understood that maybe I was going to get married this coming Friday, and if so, he and others were invited.
Very short engagement.
Very short engagement, because I was very busy. I had classes. After all, this was, enough was enough.
How long were you engaged for?
Well, you mean about a week.
A week.
Yeah, about a week. We had our conversation at Idahoe's, and the following Friday night, we were married.
Nice.
And her brother was stationed up here at Great Lakes in the Marine Corps, and he came down to be there and to be best man or something. Her parents disapproved. My mother disapproved. My father didn't, but my mother did. And but we went ahead anyway.
Well, your mother sent you your suit.
All crumpled up and not much use, and I had to wear somebody else's. I borrowed a suit from somebody else for the wedding. And so you see, this is not a very fancy operation. And so we.
Well, did she want to get married? Did mother want to get married?
Oh yeah, she was quite interested in that. She was. She thought this was not a bad idea. And she was also a student, so she had things to do.
No,
So-
why did you figure that getting married was going to help you study more?
Well, we wouldn't be out, hours at a time every night. You see, we were, we'd be, living together and who knows what, and that proved to be true. So there was no. If you're dating every night, you have to go somewhere and meet somebody, and spend some time with them, do this, that, and the other, maybe go out to eat or something. It just takes time. And so we decided to get married.
And where did you get married?
There's a little chapel there at 57th and University. There's a complex there of a divinity school and one thing and another. And in the corner, way in the corner, once you go in, is a very nice little chapel. Hardly anybody ever goes there, but that's where we went. And then we had, I don't know whether we had a reception somewhere over there for, after the wedding. And somebody gave us his apartment out here on the South Shore, South Side, for a honeymoon, which lasted about a day or two. And he was recently in town.
Really?
Hadn't seen him many, many years. And then we settled into school. And then, of course, Helen decided she wanted to get into the act. Helen Margaret, that is. And so, not the following June, but the following spring or whatever it was. And so there we were.
And you planned the whole wedding in a week?
Oh, less than a week. It must have been a couple of days. Main thing was to get the chapel.
And the
Very
license.
nice little chapel. Every once in a while, I look in on it, and it was, it really was very small. Couldn't get very many people in, and the people that were there were people that from my dormitory. They were kind of intrigued by all this, and look what he's doing, and so forth. And so we had this. We had the ceremony. We had the preacher was the husband of a girl that had been a very good friend of ours, of mine really, back in high school. She was involved out of Wheaton College, very conservative Christian movement there, and so we got him to officiate, and Bill Hayton was the best man, and that was it. We were married.
And how long ago was that?
Excuse me?
How long ago was that?
Well, it was. What did I say on that thing? How many years? What anniversary are we talking about now?
65.
55?
65.
65. So there you are. 65 years ago. This is on the 28th of January.
Was it as cold as it is today?
It was a cold night. I remember that. I remember people talking about how cold it was, and when Bam called today, he remarked on it. He recalled it as having been cold. Yeah. He was the best dressed man at the wedding. He had the Marine Corps the fancy dress uniform on, and so that worked out very well there. And then I was in school. I mean, back to school, and we finished the school year and stayed through the summer. I mean, because I was married, I didn't go off somewhere, work somewhere or something. I just stayed in school and got my degree. Not too long after. Well, a year and a half later.
And what about your wife? When did she finish?
She finished earlier as a social worker and began working for, I don't remember the name of it, it was a Jewish a social work agency here in Chicago. So she worked for them for,
You don't
well,
know where she was.
until Helen was born. And then since after that she dropped out of the regular market. She did work later. Her work later was working as sort of a research assistant for somebody in the administration building, having to do with, well, you know, various kinds of activities of the particular organizations that she was involved in.
She was with the
And she
family
was-
director for example.
And I remember
Right,
she had an office in the basement of the administration building in which she had to do, collect, you know, to work on documents and put them in alphabetical order. I remember going down to see her in the basement there, and she had a big piece of paper with the alphabet,
I would do that too.
right?
That's a great idea.
Yeah, and she said, you know, what's that for, sir? It was, sometimes I'm not sure which letter comes before which letter after a while. So she had this
Yeah.
thing here to guide her through
Just use
the
Google.
thing. Yeah.
Look, it's after him.
I just looked on the.
So she did
typewriter.
work.
That
She
works
did
too.
work at this sort of.
Great.
Then later on, the big job was the college bowl. You remember that quiz show,
Yeah,
college
sure
bowl?
do. I think it was on Sunday nights or Sunday late
Yeah,
afternoon.
it was a big quiz show, and there was a friend of ours, Robin Oggins. He's a historian now. He got his PhD in history, and he was the one who ran it. And what he would do is his work was to check the answers. There was a woman in Connecticut who prepared the show, the format, the questions. There was this other woman in New York who would be on the television with it, and she didn't know anything really. She was very nice and intelligent, but the one in Connecticut was the one who really put the show together, and then my wife had to check everything every week about you know, make sure that the facts were right. Sometimes the facts were not just the question and answer; it would be the background material that would be just thrown in extra. Well, she had to check all that.
And she had
would do-
security clearing?
What?
She had to have security clearing so that she wouldn't leak the answers?
Well, I don't remember there's any problem with it. I mean, well, first place, Oggins did it until he graduated. And then after he finished, she took it over. And she did it for several years. Now, Oggins' own story is very interesting. His father was executed by Stalin he'd done some espionage for the Russians, but he was executed by Stalin when they fell out for some reason or another. And only a few years ago did Oggins himself find the details out about what had happened to his father.
Yeah.
There's a book that tells all about it now. So she took over the show and did it for a number of years. And it was, you know, it paid well for us, and it was something that she would have to do every week. There was a crisis one week when she left part of it in the library lying around, and the question was, did anybody see it, and what happened, and so forth. Turned out it worked out. It didn't seem to matter. Yeah.
Did she use the library for research?
Oh
or did
yeah,
she
that's
use
where
the-
she spent a lot of time in the library. Because
And also Encyclopedia Britannica.
Britannica, we got the Britannica as a matter of course, and she was. The thing about it is that it wasn't just the question and the answer.
Right.
It was all the background stuff
Sure.
that'd be thrown in for
Right.
entertainment. You see,
Right.
and and all that had to be checked. Especially, she never could watch the show.
Nerve-wracking.
She could never watch it, and you always hoped that the margin of victory would be fairly large.
Yeah,
Because if it was close,
right,
these kids on both sides would be, very bright,
right.
and boy, they would go over everything to try to find
What was
something
wrong?
that was wrong.
That's
And
right.
so we always had to be. When she learned that it was been, a fairly good margin, she said, and the thing about it was, the woman in New York, whom we didn't know, we knew by phone, talked with her a lot, but we didn't really know her. She didn't know anything. She was just, she was a radio lady, or television really, and she was, she had to be guided through things, and sometimes there would be answers given that she didn't know enough to know that this was a variation of the answer that had been the
Right.
official one.
Right.
I don't remember now what the
Right, I
details were,
think you
but
can
there were.
imagine.
There was an example where one of the answers, the student said the Ottoman Empire.
Yes,
And the judge and the MC said, no, Turkey.
yeah, Turkey, yeah.
Which didn't exist at the time, so it really was the Ottoman Empire.
Yeah,
So-
well, whatever it was, you had that kind of problem. And finally, of course, all that ended, and of course, and after she got her degree, she worked for this Jewish agency, which had its office somewhere on the north side. So she would commute back and forth until Helen was born, and then she dropped that, if I recall correctly. And, so that's what happened. In the meantime, I was going to school, and I finished eventually. I went on to other things.
What's a nice anniversary story, Father?
Is it all right?
Yep, that's
Very
good.
nice.
Perfect.
Yes.
Perfect. Oh boy.
Thank you.
It'll go viral.